Let's talk now, though, to Professor Karol Sikora, former chief of the cancer programme at the World Health Organization and Dean of Medicine at the University of Buckingham. Very good morning to you, Professor.
Good morning, Mike.
Thank you so much for joining us once more. We've had, I suppose, a few different events news-wise since we last spoke, not least the admission to hospital of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who today seems, we think, slightly better than we thought yesterday anyway.
Yeah, I hope so. As I said, he's quite a bouncy chap.
Yes.
I would imagine he'd come back quite quickly and get out of the ITU maybe tomorrow morning, and then a few more days in hospital and then back to Downing Street if all goes well.
I mean, some people are suggesting it might be longer than that because he has had this temperature for quite a long time. And we are told he has avoided a pneumonia so far, and he has avoided being on a ventilator. So what's your general take on someone who's been in ICU for a couple of days?
He's not even had to have support. There's something before a ventilator called continuous positive airway pressure. He's not had to have that, and that's something where you remain fully conscious and so on. With a ventilator, you have to be made basically sleepy, and the machine takes over your breathing, and you're unconscious basically.
Right.
So he's not gone that route. So I suspect it's going to be okay, because the reason you get this is that the coronavirus causes inflammation in the little air sacs at the depths of the lung, and it's your body reacting to the virus that causes the damage. It's as though the immune cells eat your own lung cells up because they've been triggered to by the virus. It's a very bizarre reaction.
Yes.
And it's very variable.
It does seem incredibly sort of hit and miss, doesn't it? Because so many people that we've spoken to and we've heard from, some in the public eye, some not, have had it, like Matt Hancock, and been fine, and like even Prince Charles, who had it and was fine.
Yeah, and so a lot of people are out there that haven't even had any symptoms, that are almost certainly immune to it. They've had it. And we know from the cruise ship Diamond Princess in Yokohama Harbor, for example, they tested everybody, and of the 700 people that were positive, only half, and these were older people, over 70 mainly, that's the demographic of cruising, and these people were positive for the test but had no symptoms whatsoever.
Yes.
So that's really hopeful bit of fact. I'm living on the fact that I've had it. I want to believe I've had the virus. So maybe a month ago when I had a runny nose and a sore throat, thought nothing of it. And that was it. And a lot of us, probably that's the case. And that would be really good because it would improve the chances of getting out of lockdown within the next few weeks, I guess.
Yes, I think so. What do you make of places like Sweden where they've operated a slightly different kind of lockdown
everyone's
policy?
Doing it differently.
Nobody really seems to be sure whether anyone's got it right or not either.
That's exactly right. It's an experiment, and we've got to follow it closely. So Austria opens on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Norway, I believe today it's opening.
Okay.
And you begin with the obvious things. You don't sort of have complete unlock the whole thing. You let younger people get out and about. You let little shops, people at workplaces with less than 50 people, small shops, open up. And then gradually you encourage mixing, but you follow it. You monitor closely. 2 o'clock every day, the government infection figures come out. And they're not totally accurate because they bounce around a lot.
And they're also 24 hours sort of behind, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes they don't have Manchester or Leeds didn't come in yesterday in time, so they put them out without it. And you look at that, and it looks as though we're on the plateau phase, right at the top, and we're waiting for it to go down consistently. It did go down yesterday a bit, but that's one reading doesn't mean it's there. So we'll be glued to the screens at 2 o'clock to see what they are. Unfortunately, the deaths and the illness comes after the infection has peaked. So the peak is going to be this weekend for NHS.
Right.
And that's why it's really important that we try and dampen down the plateau as much as possible to prevent those small percentage of people that need hospital admission, even ITU admission, to be as few as possible during the surge at the weekend.
And is it still the case that we're not entirely clear exactly how long the virus can hang around before, for example, you become infected? Like if you were exposed to it, say, for example, back in, I don't know, March the 10th, is it possible that it would be May before you would maybe show symptoms?
Yeah, that is one of the problems. There's the lag time from the time you get infected to the time you get symptoms. It seems to be very variable. We've got a lot of data now, and from China, from Korea, from Italy, Germany, who are ahead of the curve with us. I mean, China's well ahead, and they're over it. As you know, Wuhan's opened
Well,
up.
that's what they're telling us, but I'm slightly, I don't know, I'm questioning of whatever China says, because as much as we can see pictures from Wuhan of people walking around, you know, I mean, it's at that point now where you're thinking, well, you know, are they actually walking around, or is it actually Wuhan? Is it a film set? I mean, who knows, you know?
It looks like any city, any modern city, doesn't it?
It does.
I was actually there in October.
Were you?
Yeah, with a group of British cancer specialists, and we visited the cancer centre there. Very advanced. I mean, we were taken
Well, I was
aback.
amazed. You know, I hadn't heard of Wuhan ever before this happened. And when we had a call from a British expat living there who said, "Oh, don't worry, it's a city of 13 million people." And I was like, "Really?
That's
I mean,
amazing.
incredible."
It was amazing. Stayed in a beautiful hotel in a park. It was just lovely.
Yeah.
And the weather was super in October. So I'd like to go back under better circumstances.
Yes, I think that would be good. I've got a question for you from Les in the West Midlands, who's texted in while you're on. He says, "What does the virus do to your lungs exactly?"
Okay, that's very interesting. So the virus gets into the little sacs, they're called alveoli, right at the end of the bronchial tree, deep down, and it causes inflammation. And the amount of inflammation, an angry response from our own immune system, it varies enormously. Some people have a very powerful reaction, and that immune reaction causes fluid, we call it edema fluid, to gather in the alveoli, and that makes them tense, and so you can't breathe properly, and eventually you can't get enough oxygen in the blood. And almost said what happened to Boris on Sunday night. They probably put an oxygen meter on him, because the thing you clip on a finger, and you measure the saturation of oxygen. Normally it's 96 to 98, and in his case it presumably dropped below 94, and he was having breathing difficulties, so that led to the admission to hospital.
Oh, okay. So it's a sort of creeping problem, isn't it? Which is why you need the oxygen.
You just have to wait. Now, lots of drugs are being tested. There are about 5 different approaches, including using serum from convalescing patients, which seems to be top of the list.
Yes, that's a story I saw today and wondered about.
Yeah.
This is the kind of plasma route, right?
The trouble is it's so difficult to do meaningful clinical trials with patients in an intensive care unit. And what you do, you can't randomize it.
No, of course.
In reality, you have to give everybody the same thing.
Right. So in the case of, say, a Prime Minister who has the need for oxygen, at what point does the lung repair itself, if it does?
After some time, usually about 4 or 5 days, it starts to repair. The virus is killed by the immune system, and then everything settles down. Normally, under these circumstances, giving people a big dose of steroids seems to do the trick.
Okay.
And that's what I said, why aren't they giving steroids? And the Chinese did give steroids, and they did do a randomized controlled trial. I mean, it's just amazing what they've done.
Yes.
And there was no benefit. So, and of course, the problem with giving steroids, you increase the risk of getting an infection later, secondary pneumonia.
Right.
And that's why a lot of older people are very vulnerable to this, because they have a higher risk of secondary pneumonia. Men seem to be more vulnerable than women, and smokers are even more vulnerable still.
Right.
So male overweight smokers are the ones that are suffering the most from this.
Okay.
And we've got really good data coming out that's publicly available. The critical care publication comes out every day showing the occupancy of the beds, but also the outcomes of patients, which, it's classic. The age is related to outcome. That's the biggest driver. And that's why Boris, I suspect, will get out. He's 55, 56, and that's a good age to be. If he was 85, it wouldn't be so good.
No, quite. And one final question for you, Professor. You were kind enough to send me a note the other day to say that you were able to admit NHS cancer patients at your centres. That's good news for people, isn't it?
Yeah, we've started treating on Monday in Newport, South Wales, and on this Friday, we're starting up in Newcastle. And I think the private sector and the public sector really have to work together through this, and it's great to see it, that we can do that. I mean, I've been public sector most of my career, and 40 years as a consultant in the NHS, so there's strengths in both, and there's weaknesses in both. And I think working together, we can really move the whole thing forward and meet the emergency, which is what this is.
Yeah.
Because after this is over, the NHS is going to be really knocked back. It's going to be knocked back at least a year, even if we can get over this by June, because of all the backlog of cold surgery, people with eye operations, head and neck operations, cancer, cardiac problems. They're not going away while this is going on.
No, of course. And they do need to be treated, a lot of these people, as well.
Exactly.
Professor Karol Sikora, thank you very much indeed, Dean of Medicine at the University of Buckingham, with some encouraging words, always with some encouraging words, because he's under the impression that certainly from what we can see that is happening with the Prime Minister, that things might be a lot less gloomy than perhaps we thought they might have been yesterday, which has got to be very good news, of course, as well.